Hello, my name is Shavan, Program Manager at Acodis, and today I would like to answer the question that is maybe simple but very important. Can centralized software-defined architecture deliver smarter and safer ADAS? And instead of answering this in theory, I would like to showcase this by using a concrete ADAS workload. But before doing this, let me briefly explain why this matters. And the question matters because the automotive industry is facing a lot of challenges coming from several directions. For example, the growing software complexity, the rising validation effort, or the increasing update and cybersecurity requirements. And on top of that, there's also the urgent need to scale features across full vehicle generations. So all those things together are explaining why software-defined vehicle and zonal architectures receiving so much attention, because they promise scalability, reproducible validation and logging, and continuously software updates via over-the-air updates. So in one sentence, it helps to very quickly evolve the vehicle to a complete system, a digitalized system. And to test this in a realistic setting, we chose a very specific and concrete ADAS workload. And our case study is exactly as depicted here, a low-cost 360-degree near-field ToF subsystem. The use case is for close range coverage without blind zones, for example, for parking or for collision-related scenarios where it's very important to maneuver through, let's say, traffic and other cars. This is the case, for example, for emergency vehicles. Exactly. And the target architecture should be able to scale up to 32 sensors or even more. And this is exactly why this case is so interesting, because dense perimeter sensing becomes complex very quickly. And this is the kind of use cases where software-defined vehicles promises the most value, the biggest value. And to explore that, we created and built such a prototype. So the prototype was intentionally simple, scalable, traceable. It consists of hardware modules consisting of sensor strips. Each sensor strip is equipped with a Raspberry Pi-based control and logging, and above all those strips and Raspberry Pis, there's a master layer synchronizing all measurements and merge data. Here it's very important to say, even on this level, so we are talking about the prototype level, that the focus is not having right away a very good product. The focus is and was how can we create a system that helps us to test such a sensor setup quite fast, and that helps us to also attach it to the real test vehicle quite fast and easy. The other requirements are, for example, that those setups that you are building for your prototype, that they should be repeatable, configurable, and that those systems also helps you to test on a very structured and good way. So you see, before starting your prototype, you need to make sure that they are fulfilling exactly those requirements, because, and this is very important, and this should be the outcome of the whole presentation, is that the goal should not be perfect components. The goal should be how can you manage, you and your team, to learn very fast and on a very structured way. And this brings us, as said before, to the broader point of my presentation and also the case study here. For software-defined vehicles, it's not just an improved architecture that helps you to use more software in your car. For software-defined vehicles, you need also a different way how to deal from now on with developing components and software for the car and so on. And if we look back and look how traditionally automotive developed key features, it was always feature by feature, component by component. And it could be said that this is only suitable for a system that is stable, first of all, and also well understood. And both things are not the case for autonomous driving, and specifically not the case for software-defined vehicle. So the approach should be shifted shifted towards system first and not component first. Because again, the goal should be not perfection, it should be how can you learn as fast as possible and on a structured way to reach your goal. And if we apply all those things mentioned here to our internal development, we started like that. We, first of all, has selected very quickly suitable sensors. Then we built hardware test setup around those sensors. And very early, we integrated this setup to our overall system. So in our case, the AD stack and the software-defined vehicle. And then, and this was the last point, then we started to think about how to optimize, how are my results looking like, and how we can learn continuously to improve exactly at the end our end-to-end solution. The 4 points on my slide here is summarizing what that means for a concrete case study like that. In the next following slides, I will then elaborate on exactly those 4 points. So let's say 4 principles from now on. Let's start with the first one. The first principle is whatever you are doing, it should be directly integrated into your system. As mentioned before, in our case, it's the AD stack. And in our case, we started with a sensor setup, and we tried, after we integrated into the AD stack, to understand, first of all, how the outputs should be processed so the AD stack at the end is using the information on the best way. In our case, it's the controller module inside the AD stack. And here we figured out that if you think in systems, that the best way how your system is performs the best is by not passing too much and too rich information about your scene to the controller. It should be very easy. In our case, it's exactly this what is depicted on the right graph. It should be just the information where the module, so the controller, is allowed to drive safely. So the focus here is just to pass meaningful information that is quite easy to understand for, at the end, the controller inside the AD stack. This is more important than introducing information that is very rich and is telling you a lot of information about your scene. And this, what we are talking about, is also a very good point for people that is dealing on a management level around those topics. And this is important because we can say that this is a kind of simplicity, and many times I see that simplicity very often is mistaken as it's a kind of limitation. But this is not the case, specifically not for cases like in our case, where we are talking about safety relevant scenarios. Because first of all, before introducing information, you need to make sure that you are understanding why your system, for example, in specific cases, are acting like that. So you need to understand your own information that you are passing to your AI system and whatever system you are using inside your AD stack. Okay, now let's move on to the second principle, and this is validation and versioning. On my right side, you can see a very specific graph showing the results, and I picked them on purpose because they are showing some intermediate result that is interesting for the interpretation of such component and system. So you see that objects that are close to the vehicle itself, like up to half meters, that they are detected quite well. But objects that are away, like 1 meter away or 2 meters away, suddenly the performance drops. Okay, now the interpretation. Based on the traditional component-based interpretation, you can say the component is not working fine, and that's it. But if you go on a system level and try to interpret it, your results, you have much more room left. For example, since we are validating the whole system and not just a component, you can say, wait a minute, the sensor setup and the component what I built in the whole sensor system architecture is working fine for objects that are close to the vehicle, but not for 1 meter. So you can suddenly say that your MVP or your prototype is already working fine for a specific use case. This was not the case before. And then from here, you can start to do the same things what engineers and developers did also before. So now you need to understand, okay, why in a use case like half meters, my system is working, but not for 1 meter. So here I would like to dig a little bit more into this topic without being too fast here. So the reason why this effect is happening is because of the wide field of view where more ambient light is going into the detector. And this leads to the problem that spatially and temporally the signal is dispersed. And that's why it could be happen, like you can see in the graph here, right, that complete objects cannot detect it robustly anymore. From here on, I would like to keep going with the third principle, and this is just use the zonal and software-defined vehicle architecture. This is very important, and the value of such architectures becomes visible when the problem is system integration. This architecture, so the zonal architecture, is helping you to abstract as much as possible hardware from software. This is very important. The second point is that such an architecture is terminating the need of I/O for the sensors, is managing the health and also making the communication path much more stable and traceable. The third point is the architecture naturally is helping you by structuring your code and your system in different zones that helps you to scale your system much easier. To make this here more concrete, the system helped us in thinking in zones. So the zones where the area where we put our pre-processing steps into, so cleaning up data, synchronizing, all those things are happening just in the zone controllers. Then the information that is then important and already synchronized is then sent to the compute unit. And this is the second point. Still the central compute is still the area and the position where the big picture is happening and where all developments are coming together. And the third point is that we now are able to evolve the sensor setup in parallel to the system itself. So the communication, the compute systems, and the other diagnostic relevant discussions that is somehow related to the architecture and to the vehicle itself and should not somehow being confused with your development that should be more on the sensor subsystem side. And whenever, and now we are facing the third part of the zone architecture, so whenever you are using such a system that is based on communicating, changing information, whenever you are doing such things, then you are also putting risk into your system. What I mean by that is you can see here in the graph. So this is the communication layer of a zone architecture. I don't want to be much detail on that. You see that for each different use case and different area where you are where we are dealing with, you have different protocols. And many of them are, for example, relevant for latency or for consistency and so on. But the message is that you should use this. And this is, like I said before, about zonal and software-defined architectures, also using such protocols that are already derived. And it seems that those protocols are a good rule of thumb, that they help you to accelerate your deployment, because suddenly your different engineers and also your project leads and managers don't need to too much deal with other problems that is on a higher level and are into maybe other areas of discussion. And the third principle, so in general, what you should derive from the third principle, do not see these new architectures that seems they comes around the corner suddenly, do not see them as something that you need to do. See them as a very good help to accelerating your whole development and your whole strategic approach, how to deliver products end-to-end services and other topics around your system. Good. now we are almost at the end of our presentation, and now we are talking about the fourth principle, and this is cybersecurity as a design decision from day one. In the last slide, I already gave you a small hint that whenever you are opening your system by introducing update paths, communication paths, and so on, then of course in parallel you are also introducing risk surfaces. So this is something that naturally is coming with a software-defined vehicle, and this is the reason why nowadays cybersecurity cannot be a last compliance layer at the end of your development. So it is very important to put cybersecurity into consideration from day on, directly paste it into your architecture and development logic. And this is specifically true, for example, in one of our last research and results that you can see on the right side, that even if your AD stack itself and your overall system could be stable and very secure, that on-edge connected devices, like in our case, the GNSS and RTK module, that they could be exactly the surface, the risk surface that you are introducing into your system. And here we are talking about small DDoS and DOS attacks that led, in our case, to a dramatic crash. So for the management, this means, as a very big takeaway, that operation, security, and architecture should thought together from the beginning. And now, if we put into consideration all the things what we said, so all the four principles and the examples, now what are the actionable rules that are important to talk about? Good. Now, at the end, let me derive some actionable design rules from the case study we discussed in the last 10-20 minutes. Point number one, always create and validate based on the vehicle geometry. The second point that is related to the first one, of course, is always validate on the vehicle. So redundancies, some validation that are maybe based on the sensors you are using. Whatever you are doing, validate always based on the full vehicle, because then you have the opportunity to also validate the use case. You can validate if specific scenes are appropriate or not in combination with the component that you are validating. The third point is treat configurations as a controlled lever. And I would say this is very important specifically for your engineers, because the goal should be to develop the full system quite early and not stop in the middle because you figured some specific issues, like in our case, it was the sensor issue I explained before. But of course, you need still to abstract the problem, define it somewhere, write it down, so later on you can then come back and then control it and tweak it. The fourth point is that the components and the sensors that you are introducing into the system, they should be aligned as it is defined by the zonal architecture itself. This helps you to save up wire, space, and in general, it is making the car completely, so the architecture of the car, more readable for developers and other teams. The last point is make over-the-air update and cybersecurity architectural from day one. And I would like here to emphasize again on the point, the goal should be to very fast and very early understand the full system. So develop the components and your services always in combination with the full system itself. This is very important because then you can start to learn in general and be fast. And you can then start to put the dots together and maybe derive things that in advance you were not, that you before was not able to measure. For example, interactions. Some bottlenecks that you figure out at later stages. And that leads us to the broader market message. Success in the software-defined vehicle era will not come from perfecting isolated components. It will come from understanding your overall system quite early and continuously improving it. The goal is not perfection. The goal should be fast, structured learning. And with this being said, I'm done with my presentation and looking forward to answer your questions. Thank you.